Alright, welcome everyone to my latest screencast video. Today we're looking at the Privacy Matters activity, and for the Privacy Matters we're going to be addressing the 4 questions. What is privacy? Why do you care or not about it? What are some ways technology impacts privacy in your life and or work? And will you be explicitly bringing the idea of privacy to your students in the classroom? Why or why not? So to start off, let's just go ahead and look at a quick definition of privacy. So privacy, the state or condition of being free from being observed or disturbed by other people. In comparison to that, we'll go ahead and look at a definition of data privacy as well. Data privacy, also called information privacy, is the aspect of information technology that deals with the ability of an organization or individual deals with the ability an organization or individual has to determine what data in a computer system can be shared with third parties. So thinking about privacy, I tend to lean as I look at digital citizenship towards the idea of citizenship in a community. So I like the traditional privacy idea of privacy a little bit better for my purposes, or how I'm going to kind of address things. But then with the extension of you're being watched, you're being monitored, but you're being monitored electronically. Your usage, your cookies, everything that you use is being recorded, and so that's the violation of privacy. It's those sites that use that information. Sorry, let me find the right page here. So, having kind of established a definition of privacy, we'll kind of dive into the very broad. So why do we care about privacy? And I think as people, we all care to some extent. The idea of big brother's watching you, it always kind of resides with us. And I feel like everyone strives for at least some amount of privacy. I feel like being part of a more digital age, we've just come to accept that you give up certain amounts of privacy for certain digital services. But I'll kind of dive into that a little bit more at a different point. The first reading I wanted to look to, and I'll have links of this posted below the video as well, is How to Navigate the New Data Privacy Laws. And so what I really liked about this one is, aside from kind of establishing privacy, it hits on a few points of, we as people, we like the idea of privacy and we like the idea of data privacy, yet we'll share information for discounts or pick passwords. I'm not wanting to highlight there. Yet we'll share information for discounts or pick passwords such as password, in addition to social security numbers, credit cards, and paper medical records. So, like I was mentioning, we all kind of like the idea of privacy. We'd all like to have greater privacy, but we don't always make decisions that line up with that desire. This article also goes on to give some great insight into what we can do to be more involved in our privacy. Not necessarily to shut down. I think the only way you could totally ensure digital privacy is to go dark and not use it. Everyone's monitoring it in some way or another. Even banks are monitoring your credit cards and debit cards to form user profiles. And they're not selling them with anything, or targeting you for specific marketing, but they're just doing this purely because then when something happens that's well out of what would be considered your profile, they can flag it as potential fraud. But it's just an example of even companies that aren't using data for sale are still monitoring and collecting that data. So one thing that you can do is to ask for permission and give something in return. The Internet Association defines personal information as information capable of identifying a specific individual or device that belongs to that individual. When we share information, it's important to ask how it will be used and protected. And if it will be shared with third parties, a company needs to ask for consent to use the data to provide transparency of its use. If a customer shares information, will it benefit them? Benefits can go beyond savings and personalized content, VIP events, or rewards. So one big thing is when deciding who to grant access to your data. A big one is to that they ask for permission and that you receive something in return. Also, it hits on, ensuring privacy, data privacy, and complying with privacy legislation, and goes on to talk about a few bills that are out there to protect privacy. Specifically, this article gets into the California's Consumer Privacy Act, which is far from a federal bill, but is a good example of state legislation to protect state citizens' privacy from being misused and abused. So, looking at that kind of why do we care, I'll also bring up another point, and that is I'm going to bring into our third question, how does technology impact privacy in your life? And then we'll go back and kind of talk about the two of them together. So what I liked about this little excerpt, I don't even know that I can call it an article, it kind of lays out what we do, what we accept as digital consumers as violations of our privacy. For example, the GPS, cellular phones, Facebook locator, Find My iPhone, and Twitter, all devices, applications that tell others where we are. Additionally, merely owning a cell phone tells the government exactly where you are and what kind of activities you plan on doing on that device. Even just something as funny as my wife uses Snapchat, and Snapchat has her emoji and it locates it on the globe, and occasionally she travels out to remote villages for work, and it'll just be her emoji snaphead on a map of the world, and it shows her just out on the end of Kodiak in the middle of nowhere. People will take screenshots of it and be like, what are you doing? Just little things like that. Just by using Snapchat, while it could be turned off, she's given others a huge amount of privacy, or given up a huge amount of privacy to others, as they are able to monitor her movements and things like that. Wouldn't as we jump back to what is privacy, the state or condition of being free from being observed, that doesn't really necessarily exist. If you are plugged in, you always have the ability of being observed by someone, even if it's just someone who is collecting data for your own good. For instance, the government tells the government exactly where you are. In the event of an emergency, that gives them the ability to send emergency alerts because you're in a warning zone. It gives them the ability to find you, say that they believe your life is in danger. There are certain protections that we get with that as well, but that idea of basic privacy goes away entirely. So why do we care about that? I feel like we all have to care to some extent, or at least be aware of it. I, for one, am not overly worried about privacy. I personally like when advertising is a little bit closer targeted to what I'm interested in through the monitoring of my cookies and things like that. I'm fine with Facebook making advertisements more relevant to me and my interests, but I'm knowingly giving them that permission, but even then, I'm never really free from observation. So I feel like even if you care or don't care, you need to be aware. And then, how does technology impact privacy in your life and work? So right now, it's mostly just through monitoring, but technology, so I used to work in finance. Of course, we have company-wide email and things like that, and I was talking with someone in IT that said we, as a roughly $5 billion organization that I was working for at that time, he said at least once a week we were cyber attacked of people trying to gain access to our servers, and that phishing happened at least once every 6 months on at least one employee computer. So technology, depending on what field you're in, potentially very important as we move into working with children who have certain protections of their privacy. We really need to be diligent of that, and the fact that while we have our own personal information that we access digitally could be at risk for others that have not accepted the risks of certain digital activities. So the fourth question: will you be explicitly bringing the idea of privacy to your students and classroom? Why or why not? All throughout this course, I've kind of been weighing the option of digital citizenship and, to what level should it be brought into the classroom. Obviously, the digital world is something we're not going to outrun, and I feel like to be a progressive educator, it needs to be incorporated in some level. That said, if you're incorporating digital technologies, I feel like there's some level necessary of teaching digital citizenship and responsibility. And I feel like this kind of sets right in with that. If you're going to, while I may not design entire lessons around privacy, I do think it's important for students to understand that if they are online, if they are using digital products, even if they're just using their cell phone, that information is not guaranteed private to them. And to monitor their activities as such. So, will I explicitly bring the idea of privacy? Yes, I will most definitely design instruction around that, especially when and before using new technologies to the student group in the classroom. But I don't know that it's necessarily going to be any more than a brief conversation, Cliff Notes version of why it's important. But I feel like that information needs to be made available to them, as well as taking specific rights to make sure that I'm not introducing them to technologies is going to put them at risk as well. So let me know what you think. I hope there's some consensus out there, and thank you for listening.